That young woman had worked 6 straight hours without a break. No lunch, no thank you, no one even asked if she was okay. And when she finally broke down in tears behind the kitchen door, exhausted and overwhelmed, the manager offered nothing but a cold remark. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this job isn't for you. But what no one in the diner knew was that the quiet man sitting alone in the corner that day was the CEO, the very man who had built this restaurant chain from scratch, with nothing but 2 bare hands and a heart that refused to ignore what truly mattered. He hadn't come in for a meal. He came to listen, to hear what reports never told him. And what he saw that day didn't just change one life, it transformed an entire team, a group of hardworking people who had been ignored for far too long. Stay with this story until the very end, because sometimes it's in a small kitchen and a few unseen tears that we finally understand what really matters. And if you believe that stories of kindness, fairness, and human worth deserve to be shared, hit subscribe and help us keep telling these stories that make the world a little better. Marcus Ellington was the CEO of Hearth and Home Diners, a family-style restaurant chain with 9 locations across the American Midwest. He had built it from the ground up, starting with nothing but a dream, to create a place where people were served with kindness. But lately, what he'd been reading shook him. A wave of negative reviews had appeared online. Cold service. Wait times are too long. Rude management. Customers were complaining. Employees were quitting more than ever before. Marcus picked up the phone and called his regional managers. They all said the same thing. Everything's fine. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. And he couldn't sit still anymore. No announcements, no meetings, no email blasts. Marcus decided to conduct a surprise visit, not as a CEO, but as an ordinary customer. The next morning, he drove over 2 hours to one of the farthest locations in his chain. Sunny Maple Cafe, tucked away in an aging working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. He hadn't been back to that diner since opening day. Back then, it had been his pride and joy, a warm, welcoming space where guests and staff felt like family. But today, stepping inside in a worn hoodie, faded jeans, and a knit cap pulled low, Marcus barely recognized the place he once built. Inside, things seemed functional, but lifeless. Cracked leather seats along the booths, dim yellow lighting. The space was clean, but not inviting. It felt like a place struggling to survive, not one built to make people feel at home. A young woman approached the table. Simple uniform, a strained smile, a name tag on her chest. Jasmine. "Hi, welcome to Sunny Maple. Can I get you something to drink?" Her voice was soft, but weary. "Coffee, please. Thank you," Marcus replied, settling into a window seat. From where he sat, he watched quietly. Jasmine never stopped moving. Back and forth between tables, her hands are constantly in motion. She served dishes, took orders, cleaned, refilled water, and scribbled notes, all with the skill of someone who'd done this for years. But Marcus could see it clearly now. She was exhausted. Though she smiled at customers, her shoulders were always tight, and something in her eyes made Marcus pause. A kind of weariness that didn't just come from physical strain. Behind the kitchen door, a man's voice suddenly rang out. Sharp, irritated, unmistakably angry. Someone was yelling. The outburst made customers pause mid-bite. Jasmine froze for half a second. Then, just as quickly, she resumed her work, as if that shout were simply another sound woven into the background noise of her daily routine. Marcus tightened his grip around the coffee cup. He didn't say a word, didn't make a move, but something inside him had begun to shift. Jasmine returned with a cup of coffee and placed it gently in front of him. "Are you ready to order?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. "Burger and fries," Marcus replied. She nodded, jotted it down quickly in her notepad, and turned to leave. But before she could disappear behind the counter, that same voice called out again from the kitchen. "Jasmine, are you planning to serve just that one table all day? What about table 4? You're behind again." Marcus instinctively turned his head toward the sound. That voice didn't need to be loud. It cut through the air like a cold punch. A man stepped out from the kitchen, short, stocky, wearing a grease-stained apron. His face looked like it had been permanently set in a scowl. Tony Delgado, shift manager. Jasmine flinched. Marcus felt his stomach sink. And it wasn't because he was hungry. When the food finally arrived, he barely noticed the steaming burger in front of him. He was listening, watching, every whispered comment between the tables. A young couple shook their heads, murmuring something about waiting nearly 30 minutes for breakfast. A group of high schoolers exchanged looks, one of them clicking his tongue at how that manager talks to his staff. The atmosphere in the diner wasn't cozy. It was heavy, tense, like everyone was walking across a floor that could give way at any second. Then, from behind the kitchen door, another sound. Crying. Not loud, but just loud enough for Marcus to hear. He tilted his head, stopped chewing. "I'm doing my best, okay? I haven't had a break in 6 hours. I'm exhausted." It was Jasmine. Her voice cracked, as if being squeezed by something invisible and cruel. Then came Tony's reply. Cold, void of empathy. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you picked the wrong job." Marcus set his fork down. His hand clenched, not from anger, but from pain. He had made a promise once, that his employees would be respected, heard, and treated like human beings. And now, just a few steps away, a young woman was crying in his kitchen. Crying from loneliness, from being pushed past her limit, from the crushing weight of having no one on her side. No one until now. Marcus couldn't sit still any longer. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and quietly made his way toward the kitchen door. Each step felt heavier, not from hesitation, but from heartbreak. No one should have to cry at work just for trying too hard. He pushed the door open. Inside was a cramped, sweltering space filled with sputtering fryers and scorched steel pans. But the real weight in the room wasn't the heat. It was the silence, the kind that settles in when people witness injustice, but don't know what to do about it. Jasmine stood with her back to the room. Her hands were trembling as she wiped away tears with a sweat-soaked sleeve. Her face had gone pale, struggling to stay composed but unable to hide how deeply hurt she was. Tony stood behind her, arms crossed. His expression was tight with irritation, not a concern. The other two cooks kept their heads down. One wiped down a counter, the other flipped eggs from a skillet. No one dared to look up. "What's going on here?" Marcus asked. His voice was low, but firm. Tony turned, making no effort to hide his annoyance. "Just a staffing issue. Customers aren't allowed in the kitchen." Marcus didn't flinch. "All I see is someone who needs a break. She looks like she's about to collapse." Tony's brow furrowed. "It's peak hour. There's no room for feelings. Everyone's got to tough it out." Marcus took another step forward, his gaze locked on Jasmine. "That's not how a leader talks to someone on their team." Jasmine tried to speak, but her voice broke. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "There's nothing to apologize for," Marcus said gently. His eyes softened as he looked at her. "You're just overworked, and no one here has the right to make you feel small for that." Tony scoffed. "I'm the only one keeping this shift running. If everyone took a break every time they got tired, this place would shut down before lunch." That's when Eli, the slender young man standing by the stove, finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to stop the air in its tracks. "Jasmine hasn't had a sip of water since her shift started. She hasn't complained, hasn't taken a single break. But you yell at her, in front of everyone, every day. Tony glared. You should worry about your own station, Eli. Marcus turned to Eli, and for the first time his expression softened. This young man had spoken up, while those in positions of power said nothing. And who's looking out for Eli? Marcus asked, his voice now sharp as a blade cutting through fog. No one answered. Tony shrugged, trying to keep his cool. I'm just doing my job. This is a high-pressure environment. Not everyone's cut out for it. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. No, this is a family diner, he said slowly, clearly. And the way you're running it feels more like a boot camp than a place for people. He turned to Jasmine and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Go take a break. Drink some water, get some air. 5 minutes. Not because you asked, but because you deserve it. Jasmine stared at him, stunned. No one had ever defended her like this before, not during a shift, not in the middle of the kitchen, not ever. Tony started to protest. This isn't your place to... But Marcus raised his head. His voice wasn't loud, but no one dared speak against it. She's taking a break, right now, and I'll be here when she gets back. Jasmine walked out of the kitchen. Her eyes were red, but her chin held just a little higher. She sat in a small chair near the exit and quietly poured herself a glass of cold water. Marcus returned to his table, but his eyes never left the kitchen. He didn't touch another bite. Hunger had been replaced by something else. A deep, urgent pull to change things. Now, Tony didn't stay quiet for long. Just a few minutes later, he burst through the kitchen doors, his face flushed red with anger, his voice as sharp as a knife. Eli, where are the eggs? That table's been waiting forever. Eli didn't respond. He just bowed his head and kept working. A customer near the counter began to complain, something about the wrong dish being served. Jasmine was nearby, just about to respond when Tony barreled in, cutting her off. How many times, Jasmine? You're supposed to check before bringing it out. This is basic. Jasmine froze. Not a word. Just lowered her head and swallowed hard. Marcus stood. The sharp scrape of his chair against the tiled floor turned every head in the diner. He stepped out into the center of the room. His face was calm, but his eyes cut like steel. That's enough, he said. Tony turned, surprised and irritated. And who are you supposed to be? Think you own the place or something? Marcus slowly reached into his back pocket, pulling out a soft leather wallet. He opened it, revealing a clear photo ID. The Hearth and Home logo shimmered under the overhead lights. Marcus Ellington, he said. I'm the founder and CEO of Hearth and Home Diners, which includes this location, Sunny Maple Cafe. No one spoke. No clinking dishes. Not even a breath. Jasmine stood frozen in the hallway. Eli looked up from the kitchen. The whole room held its breath, waiting for a storm to break. Tony stepped back, his face suddenly pale. I didn't know. If I'd known. You didn't know. That's right, Marcus cut in, his voice steady but heavy with weight. And because you didn't know, you treated your team like objects, like they didn't deserve dignity. Tony swallowed hard. I was just doing my job. Really? Marcus took a step closer. Then what about the tears? The crying I heard in the kitchen? The complaints from customers? The staff who endure this every single day in silence? Tony had nothing left to say. He just stood there, face drained of color. Office, now, Marcus said, nodding toward the back. We need to talk. Privately. Tony hesitated for just a moment, then walked slowly toward the back room, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the entire building had dropped onto his back. Marcus turned to Jasmine, his eyes softened. Don't worry, he said quietly. Things will be different, starting today. In the small office behind the diner, the door closed. No one heard what was said between Marcus and Tony. All they knew was, when the door opened a few minutes later, Tony walked out first. Quietly, head down, not meeting a single eye. He said nothing, just took his coat from the hook, and left Sunny Maple Cafe as if he'd never belonged there to begin with. Marcus followed. His face is neither angry nor triumphant, just steady, carrying the silent resolve of someone who'd made the right call, even if it meant broken trust, a disrupted system, and the long road of rebuilding from scratch. It was late afternoon now. The diner had begun to quiet. Some customers whispered. A few glanced curiously at Marcus. One or two offered Jasmine a quiet smile that said, "Hang in there." Marcus waved Jasmine and Eli over. "Can we sit for a moment?" he asked. They joined him at a table by the window. Outside, the soft gold of evening sunlight spilled across the cracked sidewalk. A gentle breeze stirred the edges of autumn leaves already beginning to fall. "First," Marcus said, looking at both of them, "I want to say I'm sorry." Jasmine and Eli blinked, surprised. They weren't used to hearing that from any boss. "What happened today isn't just Tony's fault," Marcus continued. "It's the result of me being too far removed from reality. I trusted reports. I trusted spreadsheets, instead of the people keeping this place alive, every single day." Jasmine looked down. Eli gave a quiet nod. Marcus went on, "I didn't come here just to observe and walk away. I came to fix it, and I want to start right now." He turned to Jasmine. "Jasmine, you've worked here for 8 months under conditions no one should have to endure. You've shown up on time. You've smiled. You've put the customer first even when no one noticed. But I saw it. I see you." Jasmine held her breath. Her eyes began to glisten. "So," Marcus said slowly, "I'm going to give you a raise. A significant one. And we're going to build a new incentive system, based on dedication, not just output." Jasmine covered her mouth, unable to hide the emotion rising in her. You really mean that?" Marcus smiled. "I've never meant anything more in my life." Then he turned to Eli. "And you, Eli, you were the only one in that kitchen who stood up for your teammate. No one asked you to. You did it because it was right." Eli blushed. "I just thought, if I didn't say something, who would?" "Exactly," Marcus replied, his gaze warm. "That's why I want you to step into a temporary assistant manager role. You'll get additional training, clear authority, and, of course, a salary to match." Eli's eyes widened. "I've never managed anything before." "But you've acted like a leader long before anyone gave you the title, and that's what matters most." The energy in the small room had completely shifted. The coffee machine still hissed in the background. The yellow light still flickered overhead. But something was different now. It was like a thin fog had finally lifted, revealing the first ray of light after a storm. "One more thing," Marcus added as the two began to catch their breath. "I'm staying here for a few weeks. I'll work alongside you. We'll hire more staff. Fix the air conditioning. Upgrade the kitchen equipment. We're rebuilding this place from the ground up, but this time with our hearts in the right place." Jasmine and Eli looked at each other. They didn't need to say a word. For the first time, they felt it. Someone was truly on their side. The next morning, Marcus was there early, before the Cleveland sky had shaken off its morning mist, before the other diners had even turned on their lights. He rolled up his sleeves, wiped down tables, checked the kitchen, and talked to every staff member not like a CEO, but like someone on the team. At first, a few employees were hesitant, but within days the looks began to change. No more strange boss. Now Marcus was shoulder to shoulder with them, helping Sunny Maple Cafe not just stay open, but come alive again. He personally interviewed every candidate for the new manager position. And then came Denise, a middle-aged woman with a calm voice and eyes that had clearly seen the world. She used to run a small bakery, one known not just for its pastries, but for the warmth of the space and the way she listened to every single employee. In her very first week, Denise brought a new ease to the diner. She listened more than she gave orders. She noticed and praised even the smallest efforts. And most importantly, she let people be themselves. Jasmine now worked with a new light in her eyes. She no longer hesitated when speaking to customers, no longer kept her head down when walking through the kitchen. She proposed an improvement to the breakfast menu, something that saved time while keeping the quality. Denise listened. Marcus nodded. The idea was rolled out the very next day. Eli, too, began to grow. He learned how to schedule shifts, resolve conflicts, and keep the kitchen running smoothly without ever raising his voice. He didn't have to pretend to be someone tougher. He just had to keep being himself. Kind, steady, and always willing to be the first to step forward when something felt wrong. Customers started coming back. They couldn't quite explain it, but they sensed something had changed. Some said the food tasted better. Some left bigger tips. Some simply smiled at Jasmine, as if they now saw something in her that had always been there, but it was never allowed to shine. One Friday afternoon, as Marcus was getting ready to leave and return to headquarters, Jasmine caught up to him at the door. "Marcus," she called out. He turned, still holding the worn gray coat in his hands. "Thank you," she said, her eyes brighter than they'd been that very first day he stepped into the diner. "Not just for the raise or the easier shifts, but for making this place feel like I actually matter." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, "Because you do." He stepped out the door. The early winter wind swept through the porch. But it wasn't enough to make Marcus flinch. He got into his car, and something in his heart finally set back into place. It wasn't about profit. It wasn't about expansion. It was about people. About the reason he started this all in the first place. About values once forgotten. Now restored. If something in Marcus's journey, or Jasmine's, or Eli's, touched you, even just for a moment, then that's exactly why we tell stories like this. To remind each other that kindness, listening, and the courage to stand up for one another still exist. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, don't forget to like, subscribe, and pass it on, so we can keep telling stories that matter. See you in the next one, where even the smallest people, it can make the biggest difference.